Hi, and welcome to Baba Eats, where I share what I'm cooking for my family, including my toddler. One question that I recently got was about how do I introduce nuts to my baby or toddler, and is my toddler eating whole nuts yet? And yes, she is currently eating whole nuts, but I wanted to go back in time and share how I got to that point where I am now. So when my daughter was about 6 months old is when we started with solids, and I wanted to introduce her to allergens pretty early on in feeding her solid foods. So I did start out feeding her nuts pretty quickly, and I started with peanut butter and then almond butter. And the way that I introduced her to those was starting with fairly small amounts. A quick pause here to mention that starting with small amounts can help avoid choking, but also is important to check for allergies to the food. So starting with small amounts for the first few exposures and checking to see if there's any allergic reaction is important. And our pediatrician let us know that having a severe allergic reaction like anaphylaxis would be extremely unlikely, especially since we don't have any history of nut allergies in the family. It gave me comfort in knowing that an initial reaction that she would have on the first or second or even third time eating something, it was likely to be a rash or something very mild as opposed to anaphylaxis. So that gave me comfort in introducing nuts to her and all allergens. So the way that I started with nuts was either on a piece of toast like this, and this is a pretty thick piece of toast. When she was 6 months old, I was giving her a little bit thinner piece of toast, but I already had my bread pre-cut, and this is what I have available now. So I'm using just a thin layer of smooth peanut butter or almond butter on this piece of toast. And then I would cut this piece in half and give it to her like this, and then she could go ahead and just gnaw on that and get some nuts that way. So that was a great way starting out. Another way starting out that I would give her nuts would be just taking a spoon like this and just putting a very thin layer on there so that she's getting the taste of it, but without getting a whole glob in her mouth that she might be able to choke on. So just a thin little smear on a spoon so that she can suck on that in her mouth and get a little bit of taste of nuts. So that's when I was first starting out. Then at that point, I should say, she started at 6 months already having a couple of teeth, and she got all of her teeth pretty early. So by the time she had a few teeth, I started offering her some small nuts like pine nuts, and she really enjoyed these nuts. And by the time she was a year old, she was pointing out these nuts because she liked these nuts and wanted these nuts all the time. So the next level up of what I gave her was pine nuts, and then also pecans. And for the pecans, what I would do is take the pecans and either buy them in a pecan pieces bag where they're already in pieces, or just take them and break them into tiny pieces so that she can put one tiny piece into her mouth at a time. And I would do that same thing with walnuts, getting them into little tiny pieces like that so that she could eat those. And once I saw that she was pretty confidently eating these, and thankfully I never had an issue with her choking on anything. I would recommend, just as with starting kids on any solid foods, becoming familiar with how to help a child if they are choking, so that you can be comfortable if you are going to be feeding your child solid foods. So going from the nut butters into some solid nuts, but in small nuts or small nut pieces of nuts. Then from there I went into some larger nuts like cashews, and I would usually break these in half and give the cashews to her like that. So on the fat part of the nut, just splitting that open and then breaking it in half again. So essentially a cashew quarter is what I would do with larger nuts like cashews. And once she got comfortable with that is when I introduced a whole nut like an almond, or now I will give her whole pecans, I'll give her whole cashews, I'll give her whole walnuts, and she does great with all of those nuts. And now she is a year and a half plus. She has molars. She has a ton of teeth in there to mash up all these nuts. The only nuts that I have been still reluctant to provide to her in their whole form are nuts like macadamia nuts, because these are super hard and solid. And so I will give her macadamia nuts now, but I like to chop those when I give them to her. So for macadamia nuts, I'm cautious. I still like to chop them like this before I give her a macadamia nut, just so that I know she's not going to get that lodged in her throat. So here's the progression now to whole nuts. She does a great job. When will I feel confident enough to give her a whole macadamia nut? Probably when I can communicate a little better and explain to her the importance of chewing it up really well. She can sort of understand that now, but I think I'm going to wait a little longer before I give her the macadamia nuts so that I'm more certain that she can understand. The other thing I'll say when feeding, starting from 6 months up until now when I give her nuts, is I make sure that she is seated, or we have a little tower that she stands in, but she is contained. She's not rolling around on the ground or laying down, which she sometimes tries to run away and do. And I definitely don't let her do that when she has nuts available to her, because I don't want to risk her choking on them. So I'm still very careful to make sure that she is eating in an upright position and that I am near her when she is eating nuts. So that's it for you today. I hope that that is helpful as you're introducing nuts to your child. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if there's anything that I can elaborate on in the future about feeding different sorts of foods to toddlers. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon. So since I was chopping up all those nuts, I went ahead and made a little snack plate for my daughter. So I have the toast, and I added some apples to those chopped nuts there, and she'll enjoy this as a little snack. Actually, it's a pretty big snack. She probably won't eat all of it. She'll enjoy this as a tasty snack